Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're in a series exploring what happens in the nervous system when things start to feel like too much, especially in seasons where your internal regulation doesn't respond the way it used to. And I want to start by naming something really clearly. Spiraling is one of the most exhausting and isolating experiences for neurodivergence. And for a lot of people, especially in midlife, perimenopause makes it significantly more intense. Not because you're becoming less stable, but because your nervous system is shifting underneath you while still trying to operate the way it always has. So, what we're talking about today isn't just general or stress or anxiety. We're talking about the neuroscience of emotional dysregulation, thought spirals, nervous system overwhelm, and neurodivergent brains, and how hormonal changes can amplify all of it. Today, we're going deeper into what is actually happening in your brain and body and how to interrupt it in real time. So last week, we talked about calming the mind without medication, especially in those moments where your thoughts feel faster than your ability to slow them down. And what we really focused on was this idea that regulation isn't about forcing yourself to be calm. It's about giving your system different entry points back into safety. We covered tools like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding method, guided meditations, including Heather's butterfly hug and release practice, observing thoughts instead of attaching to or chasing them, simple supports like micro breaks, reducing sensory input, and coming back to hydration, food, rest, and physical comfort. And all of those tools work together to support a system that isn't asking to be shut down. It's asking to be met differently. So, with all of that, let's dive in and let's talk about what's happening in the brain and some tools that we can use. First, let's talk about what's actually happening neurologically. I always mispronounce this word, and I'm so sorry. The amygdala
You got
is
it.
yay, the part of your brain that detects threat. It goes online, and it doesn't care if the threat is real or imagined. It just wants to protect you. And when that happens, your prefrontal cortex, your ability to think logically, make decisions, zoom out of sorts, that starts to go offline. So when you're spiraling and telling yourself to just calm down, it usually doesn't work because the part of your brain that would do that isn't fully accessible in that moment. So instead of fighting that, we work with it. And this is usually the moment where people are like, okay, but what do I actually do right now? So one of the simplest tools I found and now teach my client is this. I stop saying I and I insert my name instead. So it might sound something like, instead of I'm overwhelmed and I can't do this, it becomes something like Courtney is overwhelmed right now and Courtney is going to get through this. And you don't have to fully believe it. I mean, that's not the point. But what this does is it creates just enough psychological distance to soften the amygdala response, that threat response, and start bringing the prefrontal cortex back online. Not all at once, just enough to create a little bit of space. And that's where choice starts to come back in. I'm curious for Dr. Scott and Heather, how you guys explain these moments to people within your practices, because I think that's where a lot of the frustration and shame lives.
Mhm.
Heather, do you want to kind of expand on that?
Sure. So you're absolutely right about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and how that works. And especially with people who are neurodivergent and autistic, especially because their systems work very differently. So when we talk about a spiral, we're talking about when your thoughts and your emotions rapidly escalate and you get stuck in this loop and it feels very catastrophic and it feels very uncontrollable. So what's happening is your emotional regulation, which is the prefrontal cortex, is, really a lot. Its the capacity has been diminished because the communication that it has with the amygdala, which is your, like you said, the threat detection center, it gets really overwhelming because that regulation that is supposed to happen between the two has been, brought down by the neurological and differences, right, with those neurodivergent symptoms, if you will. And then when you actually add perimenopause onto that, because you have estrogen basically depleting in your system as you go through these hormonal changes, well, that's what keeps that threat center regulated. So now not only are you having the effects of your neurodivergence, keeping that from working at its full capacity, but now you're also making that even, more overwhelming and more uncontrollable because of that estrogen level depleting.
I totally agree with that. I feel like it's uh, I'm losing my train of thought here, but the tools that we use to get through this response or to what's happening inside of us. I think, well, as humans, let's back up a bit. As humans, we're really good at overthinking and overcomplicating everything. And these tools that we're using are deceptively easy. And compared to what is actually going on in the brain, which is we feel like is very difficult and very big, very loud, but it's really just a very simple thing, wiring that's going on. Dr. Scott, would you like to chime in on what's actually going on in there?
Yeah. So yeah, complex neurology, neuroscience, but like I think you guys already said it both where, when the amygdala, oh, my light just went out, I don't know why. When the amygdala is activated, right? That's like a millisecond response. And then you try to get in. So somebody mentioned prefrontal cortex. So like trying to like think your way or like telling yourself to calm down and all this stuff is like in the midst of this amygdala spiral can be not that it can't be useful, but it's like physiologically like just very, very difficult. So that's where I believe, anyway, my opinion is it comes down to some of the conversations we even had last week about the entry point to like calming or dampening that is really in the body. So specifically the vagal nerve response. So we talked about again last week, whether it's breath work or splashing cold water in your face or movement or sensory type stuff, that can activate the parasympathetic kind of calming part of your nervous system a little bit faster. And so that can be a way to tap in. And I guess with that though, is when I'm talking to people about this stuff, I mean, it's bound to happen. It's not like an overnight fix, but this is also goes back to, the conversation last week of like habit formation. Like when we're talking about vagal nerve stimulation and parasympathetic, stimulation, it's making those habits that you're not
Mhm.
just practicing in the midst of a spiral or a breakdown or whatever you want to call it. And so, if you can more consistently activate that vagal nerve response, then over time, right, you can overcome things a little bit more because it's almost like rewiring your nervous system, right? Like,
Sure.
yeah, you're wired a certain way, but it doesn't mean the wiring can't change. And I like it when people use, I don't think I brought this up last week, but maybe I did. But I like when people, because you can measurably track some of this objectively with HRV tracking. So that stands for heart rate variability. And so if you don't know what that is, like if you have a Fitbit or a Whoop band or a Garmin watch or an Apple watch or an Aura ring, like all of these things, these wearables now track heart rate variability. And that's really a great indicator over time, like how your nervous system is actually responding. And it's kind of cool to be able to see like where are you at as a baseline and then in the midst of a spiral like what happens because you can look at that on a chart on a map. So and
Interesting.
it just can be I think it can be kind of eye-opening for people, and then again also with that objective data, when you put in the effort and the discipline to do things like vagal nerve stimulation, you can oftentimes you can see improvements because sometimes I think we as humans we think, oh, nothing I'm doing is working. But if you have some objective data that says, hey, actually look at last week when you felt like you were spiraling and look at your HRV, like it's not as critically bad as maybe the week before or the month before. So that's always a cool thing.
It is, and I think with all of this, what's happening in the body when you add in the neurodivergent aspect of things, everything it's already more intense, right? And it's not the communication between those two parts of the brain is already less efficient, right? So things escalate a whole lot faster and they settle a lot slower. So by the time you realize what's actually happening, you're already deep inside of it, and that's where there's something like rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitive gosh, can I speak today? Rejection sensitive dysphoria, where something that might look extremely small externally feels massive internally. And one thing I found really helpful in those moments is not trying to immediately change that thought, but just naming the experience, because sometimes that's all that it needs to start that calm down process, just acknowledging what is going on there and why you're feeling it, and just being present with it is the first step to actually calming down in the first place. I feel like this is really big for a lot of people, and it can take some of that pressure off of not only yourself, but the whole situation in general. What do you think, Heather? I know you have some thoughts on RSD.
Yeah, I think RSD it's a lot more intense and a lot more relevant than people think. Because I mean, you hear different terms like this getting thrown around all the time in the psychology field and people who get these diagnoses, but I think that this one is really important, especially in this context, because when you go through a spiral, normally, like a neurotypical person goes through a spiral because it happens. It's not as intense as when you have that ADHD or autism or, the other things that are going on in your brain, because when you go through a spiral and you're having like a crisis of some sort and you're like, oh my God, I mean, as humans, we tend to always think about worst case scenario. That's just how we're programmed, right? But when you have this RSD, it's completely unproportional to the situation that you're going through. So it could be something as simple as like dropping my keys on the way out the door, and all of a sudden that triggers something and you completely lose control. So especially when it happens more than once. It happens a lot when I don't sleep well, and it makes me angry. I drop stuff all the time. But it has that potential to really throw you into this spiraling state. And again, when you throw that perimenopause on there because of that lack of estrogen, it makes it even worse. And that recovery time gets, a lot longer as well. And I always let my clients know that when you go through an experience like this, whether it's a spiral or something, a huge energy release or something that's really taking a toll on your body and your emotions and your mental state, that you really need to make sure you give yourself enough recovery time. And as we get older, as we go through these changes, that recovery time might start needing to be a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And we don't need to feel bad about that either, because it's our body telling us that we need to take rest. We need to get back to that baseline, and we need to let those emotions re-regulate, right? And that nervous system re-regulate.
Absolutely. It's perimenopause. It's already shifting your baseline as it is, like you said, but the estrogen the component of that actually plays a role in regulating the amygdala. Excuse me. So when that starts fluctuating, the buffering effect becomes less consistent, which
Mhm.
means your system can tip into activation faster than it used to, and this is where you usually bring people out of the head pretty quickly and back into the body. Even something really simple like, rubbing the flat part of your ear right here, you can do that in your day to day and people won't even realize that you're doing it. But this stimulates that vagus nerve, I think we may have talked about that last week. Maybe, I don't remember, but if we didn't, that's one way that, just lightly rubbing the insides of your ears here. You don't have to do both at the same time. That'd be kind of noticeable. But there's another one that's really good that I've actually started doing recently, and it's working with the trap muscles. It's, placing your fingers right in this area right here, and with some light pressure, or I mean medium pressure, and then you pushing your head to the side, and then you're going to just lightly go in circles, like for maybe like 30 seconds while doing that. And of course, you want to do the other side. You know, you don't want to be off balance, of course. But I mean, it's nothing dramatic. But it brings your body to a place of recognizing that safety again, and letting your body know that you're not in an immediate danger. You're not, you know, it's signaling that it's de-escalating that threat, if you will. Have you guys, I don't know if either of you use any similar techniques to that, or if you found anything that's helpful in that area to help with that.
Well, a couple of things that we've touched on already. I talk to my clients about, like, similar to how you said about saying your name. If you name the spiral out loud and just be like, okay, I'm spiraling right now, and you just recognize that, that actually helps activate the prefrontal cortex and helps train your brain to interrupt that loop. Same
Mm-hmm.
with what Dr. Scott was talking about earlier about the splashing cold water on your face. If you change a anything in your physical state, whether that's the temperature, movement, or some sort of sensory input, like holding an ice cube or running your hands under cold water, splashing it on your face, or just as simple as changing the environment that you're in, can really help shift your brain out of that spiraling loop as well. And also what Dr. Scott was talking about with those wearables and having that data in front of you, even whether it's emotional, mental, or physical, when you start to realize what those early signs are before you go into that spiral, you can start to notice, okay, I know what this means. I recognize this. This means that I'm likely to go into that spiral, and we can talk about doing those tips and tricks and tools that we talk about in that early stage rather than waiting until we've fully spiraled out or it's to that really overwhelming state. So having those data points is really important as well.
I agree. I really want to touch on um, the differences between spiraling, shutdown, and burnout, because those are three very different things. And I think a lot of people use use the tools that we give, use them interchangeably with each one of those, and find that when one doesn't work, they think all of it doesn't work. And I think it's might be more to the effect that maybe they were using the wrong tool for the wrong situation, right? So something that like spiraling, like is that constant loop. It's fast. It's a little chaotic or whatever. You got overwhelm and shutdown where everything just becomes too much and the system starts pulling back, less words, less processing, sometimes even complete withdrawal. And then it's not something that you can like think your way out of, really. That's something you can support by reducing the input, like you were saying, stepping away, letting the system come back online in its own time. But then you've got burnout. Okay, that's completely different, and that's a moment that's cumulative. It's stuff that's built up over time, and what happens when that system has been overloaded for too long with not enough recovery. I I I I like to, a lot of people try to use the same tool for, like I said, for all of those things. And when I don't know, it just seems like people walk away too fast when we could have used a tool for this specific situation versus all three of them. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Doctor,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Nope. I've been talking this whole time. Let Dr. Scott go.
Dr. Scott, what do you think?
What do I think? Well, yeah, I think we've already said like, well, you just mentioned it, so maybe a little bit more detail would be helpful for some people. So like recognizing maybe some signs or signals.
Mhm.
So a lot of times the body is the first place where spiral might start showing up. Um, so I think a lot of people are just unaware of that, and then unaware of even what they're subconsciously doing with their body. So again, it could be different for everybody, but like whether it's clenching your jaw, you're feeling like things get tighter in your chest, or maybe your hands, or I mean, it could be your whole body. Your breathing patterns might change to where you notice you're more shallow breathing. Some people honestly even get a little nauseous, like the stomach, starts to become affected. And of course, that's a vagal nerve response. It's a vasovagal nerve response with the lungs and the stomach and all of that. So just being aware. I think coaching people to be aware of their body. And so if you can start becoming more conscious of, gosh, I'm clenching my jaw, like that might be the first early warning sign. And then the hope would be over time that you're able to get ahead of that a little bit.
Well, and that brings up a good point of that there's a lot, I feel like there's a lot of people that don't know how their bodies communicate with them. They don't know what those internal signals are. They don't know what to look for. They don't know. And so you have us practitioners that are able to help you or guide you to start to listen to these different signals and how they're affecting you, how they're coming up, how they're presenting themselves of sorts, so that you can then move in the right direction of using what tool would be best for which situation. Do you agree, Heather?
Yeah, exactly. And because everybody's body is different, so it's going to look different for everyone. Just like, the neurodivergence is there's a full spectrum of things, and we all kind of have our own ways of, how our brain works and the things that we do because of that. This is no different. And I want to touch back on the difference between spiraling and burnout because I think that you're right. People do use those terms interchangeably a lot, and they're very different. Um, Spiraling is, when we talk about that, we talk about like the racing thoughts and the looping of, these catastrophic, what ifs per se. And there's a very reactive emotional state that goes along with that, where burnout is much different in that respect. And with spiraling, it's really hard to stop or redirect those, thought patterns that we have. And it feels like you're caught in the middle of something, whether that's the thought pattern or you're caught in a situation or, something. It's got a very different feeling to it. And sometimes it can happen very quickly. Sometimes it can resolve very quickly. Where burnout is much different, it's very persistent. It, like you said, accumulates over time, and it has an effect on your capacity to actually function throughout the day, where the spiraling is the onset can be very quick. And there's a very opposite sort of effect with the emotions with burnout because it makes you feel numb, it makes you withdraw, it makes you feel flat, it makes you feel like, you don't, what's the point? Like, I don't want to do anything. I have no capacity. And you just kind of shut down completely. And everything that you try to do, whether it's brushing your teeth or going to work or taking care of the kids, it all takes enormous effort. And that burnout needs way more recovery time than a spiral, where, like I said, sometimes that can come and go much more quickly, where burnout takes a while to get there and it takes a while to get back out of it.
Absolutely. And that's where awareness really is key. And I tell my clients all the time, awareness is the first step in anything, whether that be being aware of how your body's communicating with you, being aware of your patterns, being aware of your behaviors, how you show up, all of it. Awareness is the first step in all of it, I believe, which kind of brings us to the mindfulness part of things. Um, I think it fits into this a lot differently than people think. When your system's highly activated and you are being told to just breathe or just be present, it can feel really frustrating. It can even make things worse. Or make you go into a loop or a spiral even faster because of how frustrating it can be. Because like, I just don't know how to do it, and I don't know why it's not working.
Mhm.
So instead of forcing some stillness, sometimes just noticing that something physical around you, becoming aware of your surroundings, the feet on the ground, your hands, your legs, your feet, a chair, the underneath your butt, something tangible, because that can give your system somewhere to land that isn't in that thought loop of sorts. Does that make sense? It's not about really uh the thought, stopping the thoughts. We've already established that I don't think that we can ever really stop our thoughts. It's just learning to kind of be aware, acknowledge them, and observe them,
Mhm.
and changing your relationship with them. That's the key, is really changing the relationships, or relationship with it. Sorry. Excuse me. I know you have a ton to add to the mindfulness part of things, Heather.
Yeah, I mean, that's in my program that I teach, mindfulness is the first step. And there's so many things that can actually change the way that your brain is wired and how you perceive your environment, how you perceive your life, how you interact with, anything, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or physically. Being mindful and being in that present moment, it helps keep you from having those thought loops where you're in the past with anxiety and, reliving conversations where you're like, man, I should have did this different, or whatever the case may be, or in the future, thinking about things that haven't even happened yet, imagining that worst case scenario, whatever the case may be, but being in that present moment, using the tools that you have, the five senses, to bring yourself out of that, it really does help, stop that spiraling thought process, because you're breaking those neural pathways and redirecting into something that you can hear, feel, see, touch, whatever, to give your brain something different to focus on, that's right there in front of you, that you can't ignore, you're not making up, and it pulls you, it can pull you out of that, but it can also help if you do it consistently. It can help you prevent having those spiraling, thought patterns, because you are retraining your brain not just in that moment, but the more often you do it, you're retraining your brain on how to work in general. So it does actually help prevent those as well.
Yeah, you're strengthening that muscle. And like with anything, I don't like to use the phrase practice makes perfect, but practice makes progress.
Yeah.
And by strengthen, just like anything else, it's a muscle that has to be strengthened. And once you do it, you get better and better and better at it, to where it becomes effortless. So I absolutely, what are your thoughts, Dr. Scott?
Maybe I'll take a little different spin on this because you guys obviously have great input and information. Let me start with a question. I want to ask you guys a question. So whether you personally or the clients that you work with, like when is there a common time of day that you guys see spiraling happening? Have you ever paid attention to that?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I could say, well, for me personally, it's uh mid-afternoon, probably shortly after lunch, I would say is a common time for me anyways. I haven't really asked my clients really. That's an interesting question that I feel like I should bring up.
Yeah, I mean, so mid to late afternoon and then in the middle of the night are the two most common times that anyway I see. And if you look at that, it's like, so again, I'm gonna approach this a little differently from like the clinical perspective a little
Sure.
bit. So, and why the objective analysis and like what I do can be so powerful. Um, because what happens most commonly mid and late afternoon and then in the middle of the night, it has a lot to do with blood sugar. So when you look at glucose patterns, they're crashing at those times. Cortisol and adrenaline, right, your stress hormones, start to spike to compensate for that blood sugar drop. Okay, because what cortisol actually does in the body, people don't know this. They think about it as like a stress hormone, fight or flight, like gets you revved up. But cortisol actually, well, it sends a signal to the brain like there's a threat, I'm in fight or flight. So, what does your body need to do to deal with that threat or that fight or flight? Well, it needs more energy. So, cortisol actually releases stored glucose from the liver and the muscles into the bloodstream. So, you get this blood sugar spike and then your body's going to compensate for that and then you crash, right? So it's like these spikes and crashes, which are actually very unhealthy because they're very inflammatory in nature too. And inflammation, really what I say, is chronic low-grade inflammation. So if this is happening on a consistent basis day to day, that's very inflammatory, and inflammation is like literally underlying every disease and condition, every illness, everything, like literally, even with the brain. Okay, so when you already have a sensitive nervous system and then this is happening, this cycle's happening, it can just kind of accelerate things, right? So And I guess that's just one aspect because, and I don't know if you guys know this statistic, but there was a huge study. I mean, as far as studies go, it was huge. It was a 55 plus thousand Americans. And did you guys know that only 6.8% of Americans are metabolically healthy?
That doesn't surprise me.
Wow,
No. And
really?
here's the scary part because that's already scary enough, right? The markers that they used in the study weren't even optimal. They were like, okay, this is good. These are good markers. And it's things like triglycerides and waist hip measurements and things like that, metabolic stuff, metabolic disease. And so if you look at like more optimal levels, I mean, it probably would be 2 or 3% of Americans. Okay. So
Wow.
what's my point there is like a lot of metabolic health has to do with the HPA axis, right? So stress responses, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis of communication, the vagus nerve, everything we've talked about, and then also blood sugar regulation. And I could go on and on and on because it's obviously even more complicated than that. But you start looking at these things because these are things that you can actually look at with specific lab work. And so you can actually see what's happening. Or even more simple, which is really a cool thing, is speaking of HRV. HRV is a great, cheap tracking mechanism. And it's not necessarily cheap, but it's cheaper than running thousands of dollars worth of labs as a continuous blood glucose monitor, right? And you can get a lot of those off the shelf now. So you can actually put this continuous blood glucose monitor on and you can actually look at your like day. Like when are you spiking? When are you crashing? Does that relate to spirals? Does that relate to anxious moments? Does that relate? And what you're going to find is yes, absolutely that does. So, um, so there's so much to talk about there, but I mean, those are the highlights. And then I can't help but also mention hormones because you guys have also talked about that a couple times, mentioning estrogen and perimenopause is obviously the topic here. And
Mhm.
here's the reality is yes, hormones change. But females in that pre and peri and post-menopausal range, like not only hormones are changing, but there's also way more to it than that because we live in such a toxic environment, toxic culture. So you can start to look at your lifetime, and this is what I do with people is I look from the day they were conceived onwards, and you can see the story of what we call bioaccumulation of stress. So, and that can be emotional stress and PTSD and traumas. It can be physical stress, right? Body stuff. And then it can also be chemical stress. So, exposures to heavy metals and exposures to mycotoxins and biotoxins. And literally, what it comes down to is all of us are so inundated with all of this stuff every day that our bodies, which are designed to be able to detoxify and take care of this, they can't keep up. Okay. So these are the kind of things we look at from the story of someone, but also so my point is how does that affect all of this? Well, because hormone dysregulation is, I mean, the people I work with, my 80% of people I work with are females between 35 and 60, right? So it's in this group. And I've never had a patient that has regulated hormones. It's like that's not a statistical anomaly. That's just the way it is. Okay. Now and I'm sorry I'm going long here, but
No, you're fine.
so what the missing mark with because estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, even in women, are critically important, okay, for so many things, but even everything we're talking about tonight. And we're missing the mark in medicine because 99.9% of practitioners are looking at, even when they look at hormones, they're only looking at them in the blood. Okay, so if you're getting hormones run in your blood or you're getting HRT therapy, which can be very powerful, I'm not anti, I refer for it, but if they're only looking at blood, that is missing the mark completely because you can have normal blood hormone levels just like you can have normal blood vitamin and mineral and nutrient levels. But what are those things doing in the bloodstream? Zero. What do hormones and vitamins and minerals and nutrients have to do? They have to bind or enter our cells of our brain, of our liver, of our gut, of our body, everywhere in order to have the response. So blood work is like literally scratching the surface. Okay, so then what's the answer? So when we look at women in this perimenopausal state, and especially, sensory issues and all the stuff we're talking about, is estrogen specifically has three pathways that even if you have normal levels, which a lot of people don't, so we need to figure that out, But estrogen has three pathways that it's metabolized down. One of them is pretty insignificant. One of them we know is the one that leads to DNA damage, breast cancer, uterine cancers, all of that. Okay. And the other one is the one we want the majority of estrogen to go down. Okay. So here's the thing is even if it does that, okay, which I see a lot, people are doing pretty good with that, but then it has to be converted in the liver and detoxified to another form of estrogen in order to be eliminated from the body. So what's the consequence if that doesn't happen? Estrogen continues to recirculate and in a toxic form. Okay. And so that can impact the brain drastically and the body as well. And so then someone might ask, well, why isn't it converting and detoxifying in the liver? Because our livers are freaking inundated with stress. They cannot keep up. And then you have genetics. Have you guys ever heard of MTHFR?
No.
Okay, MTHFR is like a very, very common. You start asking your clients, and a lot of them are going to know what it is because a lot of them have been told they have it. Okay, so it's MTHFR is a genetic mutation, and there's another one with an enzyme called COMT. Those are the two things that are necessary to detoxify estrogen, and really they're important. So MTHFR basically also has a lot to do with B vitamins, so folate, B12, these critically important vitamins for our nervous system health and our body health. B vitamins are inactive if they're not
Sounds like
methylated.
me.
Okay, they're not methylated. So that's what MTHFR will do is your B vitamins aren't active, your estrogen's not metabolizing well, and so you're literally set up for failure. Okay? And so if we can figure these things out, we can correct them in so many ways. Okay, you can fix these pathways and even, yes, even genetic pathways. There are ways to do that because a lot of people say, oh, it's my genetics, I'm just screwed. No, not at all. I have MTHFR genetic mutation, which is a 50% reduction in my MTHFR, my methylation activity. Okay. And I'm completely healthy because there are ways to deal with this. So my point is looking at like strategies when you start dealing with people who like we talk about all these strategies, we need to, they're absolutely critical and essential. But if the needle's not moving enough like we want it to, you gotta dive deeper because there's so much physiology and biology going on that can be underlying why they're just caught in these cycles. So blood sugar, metabolic health, liver detoxification, and of course at a cellular level. If none of that's happening, then a lot of these processes and strategies might, just like I said, might not move the needle like we want them to. So that was
Oh,
a lot of information, but like, did that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's spot on. I think that as a whole, it would ideally it would behoove us for to use all of this cumulatively, right? It would be we have to get our bodies to a state of wellness as well as our mental and emotional states as well,
Yeah.
so that these so you have the best outcome possible, right?
Yeah, it's
But
the
there
mind
are
body spirit thing that we talked about in the first week is like you have to address all of them. And just FYI, because I forgot to mention it, is because I said blood work, somebody's probably out there listening and they're gonna be like, well, shoot, what do you mean blood work scratching the surface with my hormones? So yeah, look up the Dutch test, DUTCH. So that's the gold standard test. It's a urine test. Okay. So the purpose of that is because in urine, you're actually measuring not estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, you're measuring the byproducts of the breakdown and detoxification of them in your urine after they pass through your detox pathways, like your kidneys and liver. And so if those are all screwed up, then we know what's going on. So the Dutch test, and this is stuff, and again, this is all stuff. This is not done in medicine. None of what I just talked about is done in medicine.
It's funny, I saw a post earlier. Somebody had asked, they were asking a question. They said, my doctor said that my cortisol cannot be healed without addressing my liver first, or without healing my liver first, or something like that. And I kind of scrolled by because I wasn't looking for any of that. But it's interesting that that kind of got brought up because I'm like, oh, I didn't really know that they were tied together. It's something that I didn't even put two and two together. But yeah, so ideally it would be great for all of us to heal mind, body, and spirit, I mean, for the best possible outcome. But there are going to be people out there that aren't going to be able to address it all at the same time, or, you know, they're going to have to do it in stages, you know, whether that be for financial reasons or whatever. I almost wonder, like, what advice we could give them to even just start that
Yeah, yeah, no,
practice,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you know?
100%. So there's a ton of strategies, you know, and it's like, you know, it's hard because I have people ask me all the time, well, what supplements or what adaptogens or what? It's like, it's always hard because that's negligent for me as a practitioner because I don't know what's going on. People can react negatively to natural things too. So
Mhm.
that part's hard. But, you know, let's go back to like blood sugar regulation because blood sugar dysregulation is really a critical thing. Um, you know, and so simple strategies like when you're eating a meal, always eat protein and fiber first because that's going to dampen before you eat like carbs, right? So that's going to dampen. If you eat carbs first, they're very fast to break down in your stomach, released in your bloodstream. It's going to spike your blood sugar. So if you add protein and fiber in first, it's going to dampen that a little bit. Okay.
Ah,
Second easy thing is after you eat a meal, move your body. Like go on a walk. If you can't go on a walk or if it's crappy outside, do some lunges, do some calf raises, do whatever you can to move your body and more so your legs than your arms because your biggest muscle mass is in your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings, your calves, your legs. And so I call those glucose mops. Like they literally, if you activate those muscles, the blood's flowing through them, they're going to suck the glucose right out of them, right out of your bloodstream. So that can really help prevent blood sugar spikes and crashes. And again, you know, other things, strategies is just sleep optimization, like doing the best you can, you know, shut the dang technology off, use blue light block glasses at night, don't scroll social media, go to bed at the same time every night. Your bedroom temperature should be 68 degrees, and that's going to sound horrifying to some people, like, oh my gosh, that's cold. But that's when you get like that's literally been studied stuff
I
like 68
know.
degrees in a dark, completely dark room. Get up at the same time every day. Sleep is so critically important. And then of course there's a lot of adaptogens and supplements that can help with this stuff too. So
Awesome. Heather, yeah.
berberine, you know, if we're talking about blood sugar and insulin resistance, because that's like really at the crux of so much. Is berberine is one really good. Myo-inositol is another one. People can look into that. And of course, I'm not telling you to take it. Disclaimer, but you can look into it.
Well, those are great strategies. What about for you, Heather? Do you have anything to add to that?
Just, you know, the ones that we talked about already, but also tracking your hormonal cycle, your period cycle is very helpful because again, when you have those data points and you know your body, we know our bodies. So we know what it's like to go through this, even if they're not regular cycles. We know, you know, how our bodies go through those cycles. But knowing when you're going to have your cycle, what part of the cycle that you're in will help you with kind of tracking those hormonal spikes and dips as well. Again, with the caffeine, like I said last time, and also I just want to make sure people give themselves enough recovery time, whether it's from burnout or spiraling or overwhelm. Make sure that you learn and recognize that it's okay to rest because it happens to all of us. It's going to happen even as we work through the healing process. Be kind and compassionate with yourself and understand that it's okay to recover, it's okay to rest. And hopefully you have a support system that's there to help you, but make sure you take that time.
Absolutely, which ties in, like I always tell people, you know, giving yourself grace when you're allowing yourself to rest. I say your productivity does not equal your worth. So allow that time. Your body needs it, your mind needs it. And when you zoom out from everything we just talked about, even from last week, all of this is connected. It's all tied together. The grounding tools, naming the experience, supporting the body, you know, reducing input, all of these things, none of these things are random. They're all telling ways of telling your nervous system that it's safe enough right now, not long term necessarily. That's a process that
Mhm.
doesn't happen overnight. But these things help you right now. Your body's safe enough right now, not perfectly safe, just right now. It takes a little bit of that stress away and brings a little bit of calm in. And a lot of people will probably ask, and I want your guys' input too, because they're going to be like, well, how do I know that this is working? Because sometimes you can't notice it until you look back 6 months to a year and say, oh yeah, I can see the change if I look back that far. But in these moments, the it can be so minute that you don't notice the progress that you're actually making. And so I want to let people know that it is a process. It's a slow, it can be very slow process. But you're still doing it as long as you put in the time, you put in the work, it will happen. You're strengthening those muscles, all this, and you will be able to come out of those spirals, or those, that burnout, that recovery time will become shorter. These, everything will become less, and it'll become over time effortless. So I think there's a misconception in there that like, oh, I don't see anything working, or how do I know that it's working? That's how kind of I like to explain it in simpler terms. What before we wrap up, what else would you guys like to add in on that?
Well, I mean, as far as like, yeah, looking back, I mean, the whole like 1% better every day kind of mindset, you don't have to be perfect, and we don't need to change everything overnight because that's overwhelming and unsustainable, but setting the
Mm-hmm.
right trajectory, like I think I talked about that in week one. So like some of the things, of course, with a little bit of a financial investment, tracking, like the HRV, the blood glucose monitors, lab work, right? Like that can obviously be very, very revealing. I mean, I do that with my patients all day, but then less costly, well, really free, unless you don't have a pen and a piece of paper, is journaling, right? So like
Yeah,
writing things down, like journal every day, and even if it's just brief, like what happened, and that also goes with triggers and recovery time too. I'm glad you said that because, tracking like, man, long does it take for my body to recover from these things? It's like, well, that's powerful to see what used to take me 3 hours and now it's only taking me 30 minutes. Like that's
yeah,
huge, right? And speaking of recovery too, after these things, again, I'm not recommending, I always hate that I have to say that, but I do, but it's like magnesium glycinate is a really great supplement. It's natural, but there's a lot of different forms of magnesium, but magnesium glycinate is the best one. Highly absorbable. And I always recommend people do it, 30 minutes or an hour before bed. And that can really help calm the nervous system. Obviously, staying hydrated and then also recovering from like an episode, like gentle movement, maybe some yoga practices, some deep breathing type stuff. Really giving your biology, because it's like this, it's a physiological response, a nervous system response, but then it needs to recover. So you can help that along by doing a lot of the things that we've talked about the last couple weeks for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. Heather?
Yeah, in addition to making sure you give yourself enough recovery time, I also want to add to be your biggest cheerleader too. Like, support yourself and be like, hey, I'm so proud of myself for getting through this. I'm so proud of myself for X, Y, and Z. And when you're trying to track how your progress is being made, not only, I'm glad Dr. Scott brought up journaling because that's an excellent way to do that because you can process through your thoughts and track in real time how your body's feeling, how your emotions are, how your mental state is during these times. But also, like, we all need to learn to trust ourselves too. So, how do you feel? How do you feel about it? Like, do you feel like you're making progress? Do you feel like you're getting through these episodes better each time? Do you feel like you're not spiraling out as quickly as you used to? So, really paying attention to the mental, emotional, and physiological signs of these, situations is really important because that's going to be your best way to track through and see your progress. The data in front of you certainly helps, but you know your body. How do you feel? What do you think about it? How are you getting through it? Is it getting easier? And some of those things are difficult to track with numbers per se, but just trust yourself and how do you feel about it?
Absolutely. I think that's an awesome way to look at things. I think this has really kind of come together very nicely. And I'm glad that we kind of went a little bit deeper from last week. It was a nice little
My
segue
fault, right?
or bridge.
Too deep, sometimes too deep.
That's okay. That's what we're here to do, right? But honestly, Dr. Scott, I'm really, really grateful that you're here because it keeps us a little bit grounded and not going too metaphysical.
Hey, man, there's a time and place for it all. I think it's all good.
I know this has all been fabulous. I really loved all of the input and even the stuff that, the few things that I have gotten brought up that I didn't know is great resources to even start looking into researching, applying and integrating. So yes, I'm extremely grateful. So thank you. Until next week. Actually, you won't be here next week, will you? Right?
Me?
Yeah.
Your guess is as good as mine. Was that next week that I told you I couldn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I
I'm
think
I'm
I
all
think you
over it.
said
What
it
day is it? What time is I don't even know. I
was
don't
I think
know.
you said it was week 4 because I was like, as long
Okay.
as that is, as long as it's not the gut brain episode, which is week 5. So I'm pretty sure it's next week that you're not going to be here.
All right. Sounds good.
Do you have any ideas about May yet on what episodes? I think there's only 3 in May that we're doing. So
I'll look at it here soon. I just haven't looked out that far yet, so
if
but I'll look
you're
at it.
anything like me, I don't like to plan that far ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I like to, I need to because yeah, just my schedule's been just crazy lately. So no, I'm glad I've been able to make it on. Sorry to miss next week, but you guys will have to fill me in on how it
That's
goes.
okay. It's
Yeah.
great. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your night.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you later.